friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using the brand new apple-solutely awesome stamp set from Lawn Fawn, as well as one image from Berry Specials. So I have stamped those images out on some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm starting with my tree, and I'm going to use E51, E53, E55, and E57. So I'm taking my darkest shade first, that E57, and adding some shading to either side of the tree. Since we're looking at it pretty head on, I'm doing my shadows pretty much equal on both the left and the right. And then I'll come in with my second shade, the E55, and begin to blend that out, just scrubbing over the edge of that E57 and pulling that darkest shade out a bit and trying to eliminate the edge of that line. So I'm just working my way carefully around all of the branches and then coming down to the trunk of the tree as well. And then I'm going to come in with my next shade, which is going to be E53. And if you wanted to only use 3 markers, you could probably fill in the rest of the tree with this shade, but I wanted to throw in a 4th shade since it is quite a large image, and it'll just give it that much more dynamics to have that wider range of the dark to the light. So I'm going to finish with that E51, just filling in all the remaining white space on that. And then I want to add some detail to this tree as well, give it some wood grain texture, but I don't want to do it while this ink is wet because I want it to really stand out and be bold and not kind of disperse into the rest of the wet ink. So I'm going to move on and let that dry for a bit. I'm going to do my apple barrel with the same exact shades, but because it's a smaller image, it's going to look a bit darker. I'm being a bit more heavy-handed with that E57 as well, because I didn't want it to be exactly the same shade as the tree. And actually, I'm going to leave off the E51 on this as well, just to give it a little bit of a different look. So I started with the E57 and blended out with the E55. And then I'm going to come in with the E53 to finish that off and fill in any remaining white space. And then I'm going to keep using these same shades for the little sign that's over on the left. There's a couple different sayings that you can stamp into that sign. I just went with this one that said fresh apples. I thought that was kind of fun for the scene that I'm creating. And for the sign, I just used the lightest 3 shades for that part, and then for the pull of it, I'm using the darkest 3 shades. So again, it'll give it a little bit of a contrasting look between those 2 parts of it. And now my tree is dry enough that I can come back in with my darkest shade, that E57, and just add some little swirls and some lines, some streaks here and there to give it a bit of texture, like I said. And then I'm going to move on to the apples, the 2 that are showing the core, and using E50 and E51 for those. And then I'm going to come in with YG01 and start to add a little touch of green to most of my apples, not all of them, but all the ones on the tree and also the ones in the basket. I added a little touch of green too. I just think it helps them look more realistic. And then for the rest of the apples, I'm going to use R22, R24, and R29. So I'm starting with the R29, and because the apples are pretty small, I'm just going to do all of them at once using each marker. That way I don't have to do each individual apple and keep switching back and forth between the markers that are in my hand. So I did all the R29 first, and then I'm coming in with my mid-tone, which is the R24, and pulling that R29 out a bit. I'm working my way toward the green areas. I want the area that kind of merges with the green to be the lightest. So I'm kind of switching up which spots on the apples are the darkest, just depending, trying not to make them all exactly the same. And I will do the same with the apples that are on the right hand side, just going carefully around the ones that are cut. And then I'll come in with R22. Now the R22 I could see here did not blend into the green, so I am going to have to bring in a fourth shade for that as well. So I'm just going close to that green but not over it completely, because I know that I need to have a little bit of room for one more shade in there. So I'm going to finish up these apples over on the right, and then I'm going to bring in R20. And the R20, I'm going to go right between the R22 and then a little bit over the edge of the green, which is going to help it look a bit more natural as well, because those colors are going to blend nicely. And then I will also finish off the last couple of apples on the right with that R20. Then I'm going to go back to some yellow greens. I'm using YG00, YG01, and YG03, and I'm going to start doing some of the leaves on the trees. I didn't want to do them all exactly the same. I thought it would give it a little bit more interest if I kind of mixed up the colors of the leaves. So I'm just doing little spots here and there wherever, I think that they're going to look good. Then I'm blending out the YG03 with the YG01 and just saving a little bit of room on the tip of each leaf so that I can come back in with the YG00. And I also picked a few of the apples over on the side in the basket, and also the one that the mouse is biting out of to be in this lighter shade of green. Then I'm going to darken up the combo, but stay in the same family using YG05, YG07, and YG09. And originally I was just going to do 2 shades of green on the tree, but as I was coloring, I realized that I really wanted to have a third green combo as well, just to give it even more depth. So I'm gonna leave some of the leaves white for now and just do these with this combo here. Some of the smaller leaves on the apples that are picked, I only use the darkest 2 shades, but for the ones on the trees, I did add in that lightest shade, the YG05. And then I'm going to bring in a darker combo, and I'm going to use YG13, YG17, and G28. So that G28 is going to give these leaves a nice dramatic look because it's a quite dark green. And I think the combo of those 3 greens together ended up looking really nice. I was really happy with how this tree came out. So I'm blending out the G28 with the YG17, and just using those 2 shades for any of the apples over to the side, and then coming in with the YG13 for the larger leaves on the tree. And then there was one section over on the left of the tree where there weren't any dark leaves, so I decided to just color over one of those so I would have them on all parts of the tree. And then I also decided to do the ladder with those darker 2 shades, the G28, and then the YG17 is what I'm going to blend that out with, so it can just be like an old painted ladder, and it'll kind of match the scene but be a little bit bolder in color, so it still kind of stands out. Then I'm going to move to my mice, and I'm trying something different today. I really like using the E70s for critters because it's a nice grayish tone. They're a brownish marker, but they look gray, but the E70 isn't light enough for me for the lightest shade. So I was consulting my Copic color chart and decided that W00 might work with these 2 shades as a highlight shade. And I tried it on these mice and I ended up really liking it. I think that because the W's are nice and warm, it kind of lends itself to blending with these brownish gray tones. So I'm going to do all 3 of my mice the same, starting with the E71, blending out with the E70 and then using the W00 for the lightest. And I let that fade to white right on their noses, on their muzzles, just to give them a bit of extra interest. And then I'm going to come in with R11 and R20 to color in the insides of their ears, also their noses, and to give them some rosy cheeks. And I did go a little bit outside the line on the nose of the mouse with the apple, so I just grabbed my colorless blender and pushed that back. And since I'd left his muzzle white, that was really easy to do. And then for the overalls of the two mice down at the bottom, I'm using my favorite combo for jeans, which is B93, B95, and B97. And again, because they're pretty small, I'm just going to do both of them at once. So I started with the B97 and added the shading down the backs of their bodies, and I'm blending toward the front with the B95, and then I'm going to fill in the highlight area with the B93. And once that's done, I will trim all of these images out with their matching dies. For the background, I'm going to take a piece of Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock and some Salvage Patina Distress Oxide ink, and I'm going to use the Lawn Fawn Cloudy stencil to create a sky scene. This is actually going to be an interactive card, so I'm going to be doing some cuts to this background piece later on, but I wanted to start with this base of clouds in the background, so I'm just turning that stencil so I get a new cloud formation each time, and then blending over the edge of that stencil using firmer pressure as I leave the stencil, and then softer pressure as I go up toward the next cloud formation, so that it kind of gives it that hazy, dreamy look. I'm going to do 3 different cloud formations on this panel, and then just add a bit of ink to the bottom in case any of that were to show over the grass, so it won't be so stark white. And then I also wanted to add some splatter detail into the background, so I'm going to press that ink onto an acrylic block, add some water to that to make it more fluid, and I will mix that up with a paintbrush and then tap that off the edge of the acrylic block. So that just gives me super fine little dots, which was exactly the look that I'm going for with this background. And then I will set this panel aside to dry. And in the meantime, I have cut down another piece of Bristol using the grassy border. And I'm going to bring in some Twisted Citron Distress Oxide ink to start. I'm going to put that one down at the bottom edge. So I'm just laying that on pretty heavy down at the bottom, making sure that it's nice and bold, and then I'm going to darken up the top with some mowed lawn. And I'm going to be really careful at the top because I don't want to bend those grasses, especially because this is an interactive card. I don't want anything to snag on my pull tab feature, so I'm being really careful to keep those grasses nice and straight and just bring that color down that panel a bit. And then I'll go back over the transition area with those ink blending tools to make sure it's nice and smooth. And then I'm going to do some splatter detail with both of these inks as well, just pressing those onto the block and repeating that process, adding a little water and then mixing that up. I usually like to do the lightest color first because that way I don't have to clean my brush in between. In this case, the lighter color didn't show up a ton, but it is more visible in person, and I think it does give it a nice extra layer there. So I'm adding some splatter to the bottom with the darker color, and then I set that aside to dry. Once it was dry, I'm going to pop it in my Misty and stamp my sentiment using VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and I stamped out "Have an apple-solutely awesome day." That's harder to say than it is to read, but I think it's really, really cute and goes so perfectly with this stamp set. And then I'm going to pop my card base in my Misty. I've cut down some guava cardstock to a standard A2 size card, and I'm stamping on the inside using chili pepper ink. And I did the sentiment that says "You're the apple of my eye," and did the apple barrel once again. So I have trimmed down both the sky and the grass with the outside in stitch rectangle stackables, and I'm using my tree as a placeholder to figure out where I'm going to put this apple barrel, because I want the mouse that is eating the apple to pop up from behind the apple barrel, and that's going to be my interactive element. So I need to figure out exactly where that mouse is going to go on this card, and then I can grab one of the little channel dies from the Let's Toast pull tab add-on, and I'm going to get that lined up and taped into place with some post-it tape, and then I can remove the grass and my images and run that through my die cutting machine. Then I also die cut the pull tab piece out of some white cardstock, and I'm going to fold that on the score lines so that I have that all nice and pressed down, firmly, so it's going to run smoothly on the track. And then I'm going to take this top piece that cuts out a little tab from the top and run that through my die cut machine again. I'm going to just insert that into the slot and make sure that everything is working, and then try to figure out how much of this tab I need to cut down. It's so much bigger than my mouse, so I'm going to trim off quite a bit of that until it's the right size for my mouse to cover up completely. So this was a bit of trial and error, because I definitely wanted to leave enough of that surface area that I could glue my mouse down securely to it, but I needed it to not show behind the mouse. So took a few adjustments until I could see that it was going to go on there nicely. I'm not worrying about the bottom edge of it just yet, but I wanted to make sure that everything was going to cover at the top part first. And then I'm going to take some score tape, because it has a really tight bond, and add that to the parts of the tab that are still there. I'm using super thin score tape. This is 1/8 of an inch score tape. And then I'll just peel off those release papers, and then I can add my mouse right over top. Then I'll grab my grassy border and see that it is right where I need it to be, and then I can trim off the bottom corners of that tab that are kind of sticking out from the bottom edges, so that nothing shows when he pops out of that apple barrel. So then I need to add the little track piece on the back, so I'm going to take that piece and fold that on the score lines. I'm going to add some more score tape to the back where it's going to rest against the back of the card, and then also to the smaller flap on the front that is going to fold over. So again, I'm going to peel off those release papers. Sometimes they're kind of tricky for me to get my fingernails under, and once I have that ready, I'm going to slide that under the pull tab and just get it where I need it to go, somewhere where it's going to anchor that nice and straight on the card. And then I will press that down into place, and then I'm going to fold the front pieces over, and that little bit of tape on the flap is going to secure that. So I need to make sure that that tab is all the way down on the track, and then I'll trim off the excess at the top. I've also die cut another little kind of like a reinforcer for that tab that I'm going to put over the end. I'm going to use liquid glue for this, just because I didn't want to have to like fiddle with that tape anymore and trying to remove the backer sheets. So I put that on, and then I also die cut the little triangle piece out of the background, so it has that same Salvage Patina ink on it, and I'm going to pop that in so that you can see where the arrow goes. And there you can see my little mouse working on his track. I'm going to just clean off my work surface, and then we're going to continue with the rest of the card. So I have added some foam tape on the back of the grass to give my mouse a little bit of room to pop in and out of. I just made sure to keep that foam tape completely away from where he is behind that grass. And then I'm going to put that apple basket right down in front of him so that he is popping out of it, making sure that I have everything positioned right. I'm going to trim off one of the grasses too because it was kind of in front of him. And then I'm only adding glue to the bottom of that apple basket so that it doesn't get in the way of him being able to move on that track. I've also added some foam tape to the back of the focal panel, again keeping it away from that track so that it can move freely. And I had one part that was kind of sticking up with the foam tape, so I'm just removing a little bit from there, and then I'm going to line that up in the center of my card and pop that down into place. And there you can see that it is still working perfectly well. So now I can bring in the rest of my images and start adhering them and filling out the rest of my scene. And I'm going to do this apple tree first because that's the largest image and it's going to take up the most room on the card. And it barely fits between the top of the card and the sentiment, so I want to make sure I had that exactly positioned first. And then I'm going to take the ladder and lean that up against the tree on the right hand side. I'm going to have one of the mice climbing up the ladder and picking the apples, and the other mouse is going to be over on the left of the tree, and the mouse on the ladder will be kind of like handing down the apples to him to put into the basket as they're kind of picking the trees. So I'm putting an apple in the second guy's hand. He's kind of been past the apple. And then the last couple of apples I'm going to add toward the bottom of the scene. I'm also going to add that fresh apple sign. I decided to tuck that up behind the grass to just kind of lift some of the images up on that side of the card so it isn't quite so bare. And then I'll put some more apples over on that side, including the little apple slice. And then I realized that the top left corner was just a little too empty. So I grabbed butterfly kisses and I'm going to stamp out the butterfly trail in some manatee ink just to fill in some of that space. It's really pale, but I think it gives it that look of movement. And then I colored and die cut one of the butterflies, and I just used the same pinks that I'd used on the apples, the R22, R20, and then added in R11. And then I wanted to add a touch of glitter, so I'm going to grab some Stardust Stickles and add that to my butterfly's wings and then to all of the apples. So you'll just get a little flash of glitter when you tip this card into the light. And that is going to finish this one off, so I will lift that up so you can see that sparkle and also give you another peek at the inside. And then I'll give you one more look at this card in action with that cute little guy just popping in and out of that basket, hiding out and nibbling on the apples that the other two mice are picking. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Ring that notification bell so you never miss a video. All of the products I use will be listed and linked in the description bar below. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you had a great one, and I'll see you soon in another video. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.